Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Well, what do you know? The summer season is well behind us. We are thick and thin in the middle of October. So you know what that means. The most wonderful time of the year is finally upon us. And I don't know about you, but I'm in the mood to talk about some horror. And with Saw X currently in theaters, continuing that long-running franchise, I figured, you know what? I'm in the Halloween mood, I'm certainly in a Saw mood, so why don't we take all 10 movies we have so far and judge them accordingly. This is my ranking of the Saw franchise from worst to best. Now I think it is worth noting that while certainly not my favorite horror franchise of all time, like Halloween, and certainly not the most consistent in quality, like the Scream franchise, I do have to say that I have fairly enjoyed each Saw movie to a certain extent. Some are obviously well better than others, but as you'll see, I hold some in much higher regard than some of the couple bottom ones I'll have in my list. And today, I will finally get to answer the long-belated question that I have had pretty much since starting this channel. Who will fill out my horror Mount Rushmore? Chucky or the main man, Jigsaw? You will find out at the end of this video. So comment down below what your ranking for the Saw movies will be and what you personally thought about Saw X. So with that being said, let's get started. Coming in last place, while certainly not being a terrible movie, but definitely the most flawed of this franchise in my opinion, that's going to be Saw 4. Now look, it was always going to be a daunting task to follow up this franchise and keep it going without the presence of your main icon, John Kramer. I don't fault them for that. I wouldn't want the task. And to be fair, while the traps here are actually some of the more interesting of the series, the overall game and what our main character here is being tested over is just weak. So we basically have a cop here that's been mostly a background character throughout Saw 3 and I believe Saw 2. And his whole game, why he's being tested is, you want to save lives, you break down doors, and yeah, basically testing him for doing his job. To my knowledge, this character wasn't even like a corrupt cop or did some shady shit like the main character in Saw 2 did. So your premise right there is already a broken one. Again, some of the more interesting traps of the series and certainly some of the more gory kills of the series. So they still have that going for it, but the overall story direction here and who was eventually revealed to be the successor to John Kramer, the new Jigsaw killer, was just lame. We'll get more into this character later on with the films that follow this one, but I'm just going to say it right now. I am not a fan of Hoffman's character, but we will get into that later. So for now, this one is at number 10. At number 9, we have Jigsaw, the long-awaited return to the franchise that hit theaters in 2017. Now, if Saw 4 is what I would call one of the more problematic films of the series, this is one that I just think is the most stale. It's very stale. The traps just don't pop like they used to, and the characters, despite the pretty interesting game they're being put through, they're just not interesting individually. And the overall marketing ploy they went for of, is Jigsaw alive or is it someone else doing it? I mean, come the fuck on. It should have been fucking obvious given how mostly grounded in reality this series has been up to this point. And not just that, but it's just manipulative. Like a desperate ploy to get butts in the seats because it comes off like they didn't have a whole lot of confidence in the picture they had. Like some of the more bottom films on this list for me, it's not terrible. It's entirely watchable. And the role that Tobin Bell does have in this, returning as John Kramer, he shines like he always does, but just, I don't like being lied to. So, that's what holds it back for me. Aside from those little nitpicks, this is just the movie that feels the most been there, done that. The premise, the twist they go for, which is pretty much ripping off Saw 2, if you really think about it, with the whole messing with time thing. Oh, you think it takes place here, but no, certain things really happened some amount of time ago. We've seen that before. So, that's just the reason why this is just the most stale to me. And it's just, and even the reveal with who Jigsaw's, I guess, first apprentice is, but according to this film's timeline, it was just weak. Again, all going back to the whole been there, done that shit. So, not terrible, entirely watchable. If you want Carnage candy, you'll get your fair share. But this is just, while I do have it above Saw 4, it's just the least rewatchable to me. At number 8 is Saw 5. The most frustrating film in the series to me. Because at this point, it just felt like, with Hoffman being the successor to John Kramer as the Jigsaw Killer, that it felt like they were losing the whole point of the Jigsaw motif with these traps and why the people are put in it. It's in their hands whether or not they get free, but they do have a chance to get free. But I bring it up with this film especially, even though a few other films have been guilty of it too, was that a lot of the traps were just unwinnable. Intentionally unwinnable. Like, this film opens with a full-on unwinnable trap. And I just think that's insulting to the John Kramer character. And that just adds to why I don't have a lot of interest or investment in Hoffman's character. So, and at first, and a point that I thought I was getting interested in the whole Battle of Wills thing that was going on with Agent Strom and Hoffman throughout the narrative of this movie. The ending just destroys it for me because there's zero payoff, you know. Hoffman gets away again. Or I guess this is the first time he gets away, if that's how you want to count it. But, yeah. And just the most incomprehensible game in the series to me. You know, it was, you could have illustrated it more that these 5 individuals had to work together or they would all die. I don't feel like it was fairly hinted at with the little tapes that they were playing once they wake up in the shit. So, you know, like, this is just the most frustrating one to me. So by logic, this should maybe be at the very bottom. Because, for all intents and purposes, it does a lot of things that a Saw movie really shouldn't do. But this is just how it turned out. You know, I wanted to fairly put these through the ringer and just test it more on quality. Because I think the thing that does it for me is that Saw 5 is a better shot and a better paced movie. And there's at least a reason for why, there's a justifiable reason for why these people are in the game that they are. Whereas in Saw 4, well, I already went over that. So that's how I evened it out with my ranking. So, this is where Saw 5 lands. Take it or leave it, and just comment down below what you think. Alright, from here on out are definitely the movies that I'd say I enjoy fully, despite there still being some issues. While I can certainly find redeeming qualities in the bottom 3 that I just mentioned, and I can still watch them, more or less, they're still just like, no thank you. So with that being said, number 7 is going to be Saw 3D, the final chapter. Yeah, famous last words. While this certainly feels like two ideas for two separate movies meshed into one movie, hence why it is lower on this list, they're both at least good ideas for separate movies. The idea of Dr. Gordon finally coming back to the series while also revealing that he's been in cahoots with Jigsaw the whole time. Love that shit. And the central premise of this douchebag who's been going around lying about being a survivor of these Jigsaw games just for money and publicity, to then actually be put through a Jigsaw game for those reasons. Also a fantastic idea. And to be fair, both are actually executed pretty well, given the fact that this was literally forced to be one movie instead of two, which we'll get into in a little bit. But the only thing that I will say does not work in this film is the visual effects and the blood and the gore. The traps themselves are actually pretty fucking cool. But the gore, the way it looks, and the blood looking all reddish, pinkish, I guess, just kind of took me out of the illusion a little bit. And another reason that this is a bit lower on the list, while Hoffman is certainly a much more interesting character in this, as well as in Saw 6, which I will get into in a little bit, the outcome of Jill's character, like John Kramer's ex-wife, because Jill beat Hoffman in the previous film, just for him to come back in this one and put her in the frickin' bear trap thing, and that's what ultimately does her in. That just put a sour taste in my mouth. Not just for that, but also the fact that's what prompts frickin' Dr. Gordon to take action. Like Jigsaw tells him, if anything were to happen to my wife, you go after Hoffman and take his ass out. You'd think it would be protect Jill at all costs and make sure nothing happens to her, and then take out Hoffman if he tries anything. So that's more or less the main thing that actually holds it back from me, because to its credit, I actually think that the whole fake Jigsaw survivor plotline, as well as Dr. Gordon coming back, actually do work pretty well, despite it all being meshed into one movie. And on that subject, the fact that this was originally supposed to be two movies, I could see how, maybe have the whole first movie be about the fake Jigsaw survivor going through his game, and it still pretty much ends the way it does. And then you put in niblets of Dr. Gordon and Hoffman's whole storyline, and then you just continue that on into the next film. Like maybe the fake Jigsaw survivor guy or whatever is so distraught over losing his wife that he goes through whatever means to try and go after Jigsaw. And then you have Hoffman going after Jill, Dr. Gordon probably having more of a role than he actually did. and that could be the final chapter, I see how that could work. But to be fair, as is, both being meshed into one film as they were, it actually works pretty well, and it was actually paced out pretty well. So it's a movie I like, despite the glaring issues that I just went over, but I guess it's all in the eye of the beholder, you know. So this is where it lands, at number 7. At number 6, might piss some people off, I don't know, because I do know this is one of the more well-regarded fan favorite entries in this series, and that's going to be Saw 2. Now, the main thing that holds it a little bit lower for me is just the fact that this is one of my least favorite games in the franchise as far as what the characters are being tested for and what they're being put through. It just all goes down to the location. This one secluded location they're all being held in didn't really catch my interest. The characters themselves individually are actually interesting enough, thus why this is more watchable than, say, any of my bottom 3, and plus just some of the traps didn't pop like you want them to in a Saw movie. The frickin' needle pit, that was gnarly as hell. And yeah, but that's about it, you know. What does actually mainly hold it a bit higher above my bottom 3, though, is the stuff with Tobin Bell and Donnie Wahlberg. This side of the film is the stronger part. Ultimately because of what it leads to. The way Donnie Wahlberg is tested because he thinks that his son is in danger and he just wants to get to him as fast as possible. To where he beats the shit out of Tobin Bell. Like, kudos to Bell as an actor to be able to take a whooping like that like he did. Or unless it was just a stuntman taking all that and it was just hidden by very good editing. I don't know. But point standing, the reveal at the end that all the stuff with these people and their trap had happened several hours before the cops came in to arrest John Kramer. That's brilliant. Like, here in Saw 2, it's done really fucking well. Whereas Jigsaw just tried to rip it off, minus the intelligence and the point of why they did this little time twist. And it's just so psychological too, the way that the Jigsaw is testing Donnie Wahlberg's character. Like, you know, he says, your son is a safe place. All you have to do is talk to me for 2 hours, and then you will find him in a safe place. Literally in a safe place. As we see, his son is locked in the safe, in the same room that they have been the entire time. That's brilliant. One of the best twist reveals in the entire franchise, and if anything, possibly one of the best twist reveals I have ever seen. And in a way, I think it may actually be better than what they reveal in the original film. Sorry, but in a way, not sorry. So overall, Saw 2, damn good movie. Even if there's definitely one chunk inside of the movie that I favor more than the other side, but both mix very well and they make for an entertaining film. At number 5, we have Saw 6. Easily the best of the Hoffman era of Saw films, in my opinion at least. But not only is Hoffman at his most interesting in this film, but this is just one of the most interesting and greatest ideas for a game that we have ever had in this series. It's about health insurance companies and how they quite literally, day to day, screw people over and choose with their own wallet who lives and who dies, all for pure financial benefit. They're the scum of the earth. I hate people like that. And the way this film jabs at them and puts people like that through these rigorous traps was so satisfying to watch. I loved seeing some of these people die, as awful as that may sound. But at the core of it, the main character who runs one of these insurance companies, this douchebag piece of shit who chooses and who lives and who dies with no remorse, ends up screwing over John Kramer at one point, and so he's put through these rigorous traps and a game of his own. It is now up to him, as he has to choose between his own employees, as well as various other people he screwed over, between who lives and who dies. And what I appreciated about it is that as this game goes on, it actually opens his eyes and he starts to realize what a piece of shit he's become, and he sort of grows as a person. That really surprised me because throughout most of the movie, I was rooting for him to die, as well as most of the other people in these traps, because, they screw people over, their health insurance, fuck these people. But not only is this another awesome, superb display of traps and gore, per what you expect for the series, etc., but as I mentioned earlier, this is Hoffman easily at his most interesting. While at first it may not look like that, the way the film is going in the beginning, but as soon as he goes full unhinged on the cops, as soon as they're about to expose who the new Jigsaw copycat killer is, he goes full ape shit, and it is awesome. So, and then the ending is pretty good too. As much as we're starting to get invested in how much this douchebag is starting to see how much of a douchebag he's becoming, when he dies at the end, it's still pretty satisfying, I'm not gonna lie. Because at the end of the day, he was still a piece of shit. He could have changed at any point in his life. But as per these Jigsaw games, sometimes it's just too late. So, and I also gotta mention, the way Jill gets one up on Hoffman in this movie, even though it's later undone in the next movie, one of the best endings in the series. Do not even try to argue with me on that. Y'all know it's true. At number 4 is going to be Spiral from the Book of Saw. Now, just right off the bat, the thing that I loved most about this movie is that it was able to do something different while at the same time holding on to all the core essential ingredients that fans would want to see in a Saw film, with the traps and the gore, and even a bit of a thematic connection to the traps as far as why these people are being tested. I loved all that. It was the freshest chapter and just the most fun that I have had with this series since Saw 6. As much as I like the final chapter, there were some pretty glaring flaws in that one. This was an idea that came from the mind of Chris Rock, who saw not only a chance to revive this franchise, but also his film career. And not only is his character very interesting, but this might be the best performance I have ever seen from Chris Rock. It always fascinates me when a mainly comedic actor, someone known mainly for their comedy, is able to give a more serious, dramatic performance like this. And he really shines in this movie. I sympathized with his plight, with how he has to deal with all the corruption behind the scenes in the police force. And then you really get invested with when he starts getting these messages from the Jigsaw copycat killer and then trying to unravel all that. It was all fascinating. And even the twist reveal at the end, obvious as it may be to some, actually works pretty well narratively. It's able to weave in a nice commentary on police brutality without bashing you over the fucking head with it. It's all subtly weaved in there. And that's something else I really appreciated. Now, I know at the moment that Saw X is doing very well in theaters, and that any sequel to follow, or any future film to follow, will likely continue the John Kramer storyline to any extent, which it should. He is the face of the franchise. But if we were to ever get some sort of follow-up to this, even in the form of a TV show. Just something to follow up this storyline also. I would be very interested in checking it out because they had me hook, line, and sinker, and I was invested in this new sort of separate direction for the series to go in. So, bravo Spiral, and bravo Chris Rock. At number 3 is the one that started it all, the original Saw. Now, to get the biggest positives out of the way, it delivers one of the freshest, most original concepts for a horror franchise that I have ever seen. John Kramer is one of the GOATs in horror, and the reverse bear trap is easily the most iconic trap in the entire franchise. Now, going into why it's not top 2 or even number 1, for as much as all the setups and the ideas in this are really good, with the police investigation and then Adam and Dr. Gordon and all their time in that freaking room speaking to each other and the way it all is edited and meshed together, the only real problem for the film is that pacing-wise, it kind of drags. You could have shaved off at least 10 minutes out of this, mostly with the stuff with Adam and Dr. Gordon, and some of the stuff with the police investigation. I mean, they try going after Jigsaw in this, but rather than go after him right away, at the scene once he's getting out of the elevator and stuff, rather than going after him right away, they let him get to his little area so he can set up some traps and start talking to his next victim, and that ends up getting one of them freaking killed. They should have got him right away. So that's one of my issues with this film. And another thing is that Leigh Whannell, bless his heart as a writer for this, and everything that he's contributed to this franchise, but his acting is freaking terrible in this. The character is very interesting, and the dynamic that he has with Dr. Gordon is very interesting. You just needed a better actor. Again, bless your heart, Leigh Whannell, and to his credit, he has gone on to do much better things. But at the end of the day, for all the little plot holes and issues that admittedly are in this original film, what really makes up for it for me, and I guess pretty much everyone, is the twist. John Kramer being the dead body on the floor the entire time, and the outcome of Adam's game, brah fucking vo. I love this ending. As much as I favor the twist ending in Saw 2, this is still among one of the greatest twist endings in movie history, and is easily among the best twist endings of this franchise. Top 2 for the twist. So while it may not be top 2 or even my number 1 of the franchise, the impact and the mark that it has left on the horror genre for the foreseeable future cannot be denied or discredited. Saw is the shit. Oh God, and this is where it gets hard. Like, really, honest to God, hard with my top 2 for this series. This is actually kind of why I've gotten to this ranking so late, with trying to put it out there so late, because it was actually pretty easy to sort out the first 8 of these movies where they were going to go on my list. But these top 2 I have swapped around so many times, because on the one hand I'm like, oh, I love this thing about this film so much, but then, oh, there's this part of this movie is so fucking awesome. So I have been swapping these 2 around, and it has just been hectic trying to come up with the number 2 and number 1, because I'm not doing a tie. Fuck a tie. So, with all that being said, my number 2 is Saw 3. For the longest time, ever since I had first gotten into these movies, Saw 3 had always been my favorite one. And the biggest reason being, while it may not be the goriest or have the most elaborate display of traps in the entire franchise, what does it in for me is that this is the best game and test in the entire franchise. And it still is. So basically the quick setup of this film is, just to give context for why I love this film so much, not just as a Saw movie, but just as a movie, is basically, in this film, you have this guy named Jeff. He's lost everything. He lost his son to a hit and run from a drunk driver, and from there his life just spiraled downward. The judge let the driver off easy. He's in the middle of a divorce with his wife, and the game and the test that Jigsaw puts him through is basically all the people involved. You have everyone from a witness who saw everything happen with the hit and run but did nothing, and the judge who let the driver off easy, as well as the driver himself, all being put in traps. And Jeff's game is more a psychological game. Will he learn forgiveness and help these people out of these traps, or just give in to his hate and rage and let everyone die? Now, what I love about this is that as easy as it could have been to make these people despicable people that just had no remorse to Jeff's side of things, they don't do that. For as much as you sympathize with Jeff's side of things, and you just see the broken shell of a man that he is, the film is equally able to show the humanity in the people that he's shown all this hate and frustration towards. For as much as a horror fan, you want to see the traps go off, you want to see the gore, and you want to see people die in these movies, with the traps, I didn't want to see any of these people die. It's not the most complex, layered, deep writing in the history of cinema, but in the context of this movie, I don't want to see these people die. And at the end of the movie, when Jeff comes in and is face to face with the driver, the person who killed his son, it's not the deepest shit in the world, but the way that they're just simply able to show that these are not bad people. And when this guy dies, when Jeff fails to try and help him out of this trap, when the driver dies, it is the most heartbreaking death in the entire series. I am not joking. It hits a core. Not just with you watching, if you end up caring about what's going on, but with each of these traps and him facing these people, you see how it slowly starts to affect Jeff. Like at first, with no dialogue at all, they're able to show that at first, Jeff just wants to give in to the hate and let these people die. He quickly gets some sense knocked into him quickly and tries to help these people out. And for each time he fails, you just see how it wrecks him emotionally. For as much as this series has always highlighted and spotlighted the idea of the traps and the gore and all that, this film has a genuine theme about forgiveness over revenge. And I applaud the movie for that. As much as I like this series, I will definitely admit that not every film in the series is as thematically profound as some of my more favorite ones in the series. So, it gets top marks for that. And on the other side of things, with the Jigsaw side of things, with the nurse who's captured and forced to help keep him alive, that side of it is pretty good too. Obviously, the side of the story with Jeff is the stronger part, but this is equally strong. I love the way how they're able to give deeper dimensions to John Kramer's motivations, why he does this, how he came around to doing this, while later sequels would give more context to why he does this, this film on its own is very interesting. And the way that it also tests Amanda too, like at the end it shows that this whole thing with the nurse was all along a test for Amanda. That was interesting. And it's actually kind of tragic how you see Amanda's character spiral downward, because you see at first she cares about John. She sees him as a father figure, maybe possibly the father she never had. As demented as it sounds, being that this is a guy who is a serial killer and puts people in these traps. But you get what I'm saying. Now here's the reason why it is only second on my ranking. Because honest to God, all this right now before the ending, this would be my favorite Saw film. As I mentioned before, this was always my favorite Saw film. But the more I've thought about it, and I didn't mention it earlier when I was talking about Saw 4, so now I can kind of bring that around again, is not only does the film have a cliffhanger ending, so that's kind of frustrating, and here's the thing, it wouldn't be frustrating depending on how Saw 4 carries the cliffhanger forward, how it keeps things going. But in Saw 4, they just throw away Jeff's whole, everything set up with Jeff at the end, because he kills Jigsaw, but that was another part of his test, because now we see that his daughter is being held somewhere, and that if you want to see her again, you have to do a bunch of other things. All that is just thrown away in Saw 4. I hate that they do that. That is one of the reasons why Saw 4 is one of my least favorites. Aside from already having a pretty terrible motivation for putting someone in a game, that's the other big thing that pisses me off about Saw 4. But that aside, Saw 3, while it may only be second on my list, it has the best plot maybe not the best plot, but it has the best game and test in the entire franchise for how deep, emotional, and psychological that it is. It is some of the best writing I have ever seen in a horror film. So, bravo Saw 3. Now, my number one, the big one, numero uno, top spot goes easily to Saw X. Now, as much as I elaborated on how much I love Saw 3 for its story and even the thematic elements, Saw X is easily the best film in the franchise. Why? Because finally, after all this time, we finally get a film with John Kramer front and center as the focus. Now, don't get me wrong, even in the first 3 films where he was still alive, and we saw a good bit of him woven throughout all the movies, you still had all the other subplots with the other characters going through the traps, and then the police investigation subplots going on, which was all well and good. They were well executed. But it's just something about those films where you feel like we didn't get enough with him. And Saw X finally rectifies that. And what I love so much about this movie is how they're able to make you care so deeply and empathize for John Kramer's character while not losing sight of the fact, that he does what he does. And that's just another point in this film's favor, because I'll admit, when I heard the initial idea for this film when it was announced, going back to the earlier films and all that, I thought it was a desperate ploy to try and get the fans' good graces back because a fair amount of people were pissed off about Spiral. I'll admit I wasn't excited for it. But then you got the trailer came out and the very positive early reviews. Like, it is really worth noting that, obviously I'm a huge Saw fan. I love this series, but critically they're not received that well. they're either mixed or very negative reviews. So for this film to be the first film in the series to get genuinely positive reception, that excited me a fair bit. And then, after seeing the movie, it dawned on me. Like, this was a necessary piece and chapter to John Kramer's storyline. Set in between the events of Saw 1 and 2, here we see John Kramer, just weeks after the events of the first film, being told that he has mere months left to live due to his terminal brain cancer. But soon he catches word of this underground experimental medical surgical operation down somewhere in Mexico that has apparently saved the lives of quite a few people. So he seeks these people out, pays them the money to do a surgery on him, and they tell him he's cured, that the cancer is gone. And just as soon as he gains a new lease on life, he finds out it was all a scam. They've been doing this to people for who knows how long, scamming them out of thousands, maybe millions of dollars. And him, being Jigsaw, seeks all these people out and puts them into one of his games. And ooh boy, is it glorious and satisfying to watch. Now, for as much as the series has always established that despite the fact that John Kramer has this motivation for why he puts the people in these traps and why he does what he does, it's always been established that, he's the villain. A tragic villain, you care for him and you sympathize for him, but he's still the villain. And what this film does so well is that, again, while not losing sight of the fact that he does what he does, you care deeply for this man because narratively they show it all through the lens of a man who's desperate to live. Because you've seen his background and you've seen that he was just a regular dude, and you've seen everything he's went through, and you know why he does what he does, so there's already that tragic layer to him, so you know why he does what he does. This film showcased all these sides to his character brilliantly. Now, on the side of the traps and even the gore, these may be far from the most elaborate traps or the most graphic gore in the series. But you know what? Just seeing these awful scumbag people going through these is all you really need. Knowing that they're being tortured and punished is enough for me so I could roll with it. So, yeah. All around, Saw X is a fantastic time at the movies. If you're a longtime fan of this series, you will be immensely rewarded with this movie. I love the way this movie looks, the way it's shot, and the score, just the emotional weight of the story. It's every bit as good as the emotional weight in Saw 3. So, yeah, it's still in theaters. It's doing very well. If you haven't seen it, go see it. You will not be disappointed. Or hell, I say this all the time with movies, but if you've already seen it, then just go and see it again. This is, no bullshit, Saw X is up there with Elemental as one of my favorite films of the entire year. Which is something I have never said about any of these Saw movies. So take that for what you will. Saw X is fantastic and easily the best of the series. So, with all that in context, going back to the subject of my still incomplete horror Mount Rushmore, who takes the final spot? Chucky Boy or my man Jigsaw? I think everything that I've just went through with this series, I think the answer is fairly obvious. Whilst the Saw series certainly has its lows, especially with what I went through and talked about with my bottom 3, it is easily the more compelling, interesting, and just more engrossing storytelling as far as the horror genre can go. Chucky, however, now look, I love the original, I love Child's Play 2, 3, Bride of Chucky, Season 1 of Chucky is really good, but when this franchise tanks, it fucking tanks. And I'm sorry, the worst of Chucky is worse than the worst of Jigsaw, so yeah.
Aw, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Sorry, Chucky boy. No matter how good the best movies in your franchise are, you had one job in entertainment. And for me, consistency helps. So, in that regard, you flunk.
Game over.